Welcome back to English 4.0, the radio show. Let's go! Intermediate. Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the program. It's Kyle here one more time for class number 194. This is our second last class. El penúltimo, I suppose you'd say in Spanish. The second last class is the more common way to say it. In English, it's not the last one, but it's the second last. And, well, we have, I'll talk a little bit about the test in a few minutes, the test that you're going to have for those of you who are following this course as subscribing students, following it and going to write the test to get the certificate from Vaughan Systems and from the university. I'll outline a little bit about what's going to happen, what you will see on that test, and give you some information about that. But we'll start, as always, with our review of yesterday's content. We looked at the word weather, which is similar in a lot of ways to if, but different, but still different. And I talked about some of the differences yesterday, but we can practice to know whether, saber si, to know. Do you know whether I'm Canadian or American? Can you tell from my accent whether I am Canadian or American? Whether, W-H-E-T-H-E-R. To decide whether, can you decide whether you want to eat chicken or fish tonight? Can you decide whether you want to have one or the other? To ask whether, did you ask me whether I would be hosting another radio show or not? To tell whether, can you tell whether this show is live or pre-recorded? Can you tell the difference? Can you tell whether it's live or not? To tell, to distinguish, right? Okay. Have you ever asked me whether I like Spain or not? No, Kyle, I've never asked you whether you like Spain or not. Do you know whether my grandfather was born in Canada or the UK? Do you know? Yes, Kyle, I know that your grandfather was born in the UK. Well, I think I told you that yesterday, for those of you who were paying attention. Both my grandfathers were born in the UK. Yeah. Neither of my grandmothers were born in the UK, but my grandfather on my father's side was born in Scotland. My grandfather on my mother's side was born in England. My grandmother on my mother's side was born in Italy. Oh no, actually she was born in Canada, but her parents had recently arrived from Italy. And my grandmother on my father's side was born in Canada in the province of Quebec, the French-speaking part of Canada. Yeah. So I have a real mix of culture in my family. Mm-hmm. Can you decide whether you want to go away in August or stay at home? Can you decide whether you want to go away or stay in August? No, Kyle, I can't decide. It's a tough decision. I can't decide whether I want to go away or stay. Now, can you tell, just by listening, can you tell whether I have the air conditioning turned on in the studio or not? I mentioned, I think in yesterday's class, or maybe it was in the advanced class yesterday, I mentioned that it's hot here. So lately I've been recording the programs with the air conditioning on. So if you hear a gentle breeze or a hum or a whooshing whoosh sound, not too bad, though, but you may notice it. It's because I'm running the air conditioning here because I'm hot. It's what happens when you get a hot Spanish day and a Canadian guy. He gets hot, ladies and gentlemen. That's what happens. So I'm running the air conditioning. But can you tell whether it's on or not? Can you tell whether? Can you distinguish? Can you tell? Now ask me if I can decide whether I want to stay here late tonight or go home early. Kyle, can you decide whether you want to stay here late tonight or go home early? Oh, yes, of course I can decide. Well, I'm going to go home as soon as my programs are done. And I have some other things. I'm staying to record a voice for our magazine, the Vaughan Review. because every month we have the Vaughn Review magazine, which we also have an audio file where the whole magazine exists in audio, so you can improve your listening comprehension by buying the magazine and then following along with the audio available online. And so I'm recording the audio today for this month's Vaughn Review, or for an upcoming issue, I should say, of the Vaughn Review. Now, here, weather, W-H-E-T-H-E-R, it seems very similar to if. But remember a couple of the differences here, and I outlined these differences yesterday. So basically, the first difference that we saw was that if is used in conditionals, but whether actually isn't. So we say, I will call you if I go. Te llamaré si voy. Okay? So if I'm going to go, then I will call you. But if I don't go, I'm not going to call you. But if I say, I will call you whether I go or not, then in either case, I'm going to call you, whether I go or not. Okay? Secondly, we have whether being used before an infinitive, and if is not used before an infinitive. Excuse me, if is not used before an infinitive. We can say, I don't know whether to go or not. I can't decide. I don't know whether to go or not. But we can't say, I don't know if to go or not. No. I don't know whether to go or not. And finally, we also see how we use whether after a preposition. It depends on whether you call me or not. But we don't say it depends on if you call me or not. No, we say it depends on whether you call me or not. All right, now yesterday we also looked at the structure, will you, as in, ¿quieres? Sit down, will you? Start studying, will you? Keep working, will you? ¿Quieres? So this is maybe a parent or a teacher being a little bit forceful and saying, look, get focused, get organized, do it. Study it now, will you? Do it, will you? And in American English, you might even hear people say, will ya? Which is very informal, right? Well, fix the problem now, will ya? Will you? Right? So it's essentially a little tag where you would say in Spanish, ¿quieres? Okay? So I gave you a few examples with this yesterday, and it's quite simple. Recoge tus cosas, ¿quieres? Pick up your things, will you? You've been leaving your toys all around the room. You've been leaving things everywhere. Pick them up, will you? Clean up the mess, will you? Do the dishes. Finally, the dishes they're dirty. They've been sitting there dirty for 3 days. Do the dishes, will you? Okay, ¿quieres? So this is the structure we've been looking at here. But we'll move on now. And right before, I will talk about this test in just a minute, but let's take a quick look right now at today's Word of the Day. Word of the Day. All right, our word of the day today is fear. Fear, F-E-A-R. Well, in fact, the verb to fear, temer, to fear. To fear is very similar to the verb to be afraid. And I think I just talked about this in the beginner class, actually, to be afraid. And I'm afraid of snakes, I said. I'm afraid of snakes. I'm afraid of spiders. I'm afraid of heights. Because I fear spiders, I fear heights, I fear snakes. I'm afraid of them. And being afraid of things, it can be a permanent characteristic. I'm afraid of snakes. But while heights, I'm afraid of heights, but I'm not very high right now. So I'm not experiencing, I'm not frightened. I'm not frightened at the moment because I'm not high up. I'm very low. So I'm not frightened. But if I go up on the roof, I get frightened. Because I'm afraid of heights. But then I come back down again and I'm not frightened anymore. But I'm still afraid of heights. Being afraid of heights is permanent. It's a permanent characteristic of my personality. I fear heights. Alturas, heights. I fear heights. I'm afraid of heights. Okay, essentially the same thing. To fear. Every day I fear. Yesterday I feared. Lately I have feared. So this is our word of the day, a verb, the verb to fear. And the noun, fear. Fear is something that limits a lot of us and what we can accomplish, because we fear things. We often fear the unknown. We fear uncertainty. We fear risk. So there it's behaving as a verb again, but it can also be a noun. Fear was the problem, for example, as a noun. All right, so here I'll just talk for a couple minutes about the test. If you have been paying attention regularly, if you have been following the material on TV, on the radio, reading along with your books, you're not going to have a problem with the test. Okay, I don't think it's going to be too difficult. There are some written exercises. We will see the mastering the interrogative style. So this is the one where I give you the answer to a question, and you ask me the question that I've answered. So I'll say, it's red, and you'll say, what color is it? But here, notice how, in a more detailed sentence, for example, I saw John last night. If I emphasize last night, then it's the time. So you'd say, when did you see John? But if I say, I saw John last night. John. Who? So you would say, who did you see last night? And as this portion of the test is going to be written, this will be emphasized by underlining the appropriate part of the sentence that is being stressed and that you should be asking for. So this is your little hint. When you're doing this test, look at what is underlined and remember that is what you have to ask for in the question, and you'll write out the question. Then we'll have some translation, some inverse translation. And this is just like the type of translation you've seen all through the course. We saw all those lists in your translation book. So practice with those, study with those, right? Cover up the English part and try to write them out, translating them. Translating the Spanish into English, and practice, because the difficulty that you'll see on your test will be very similar to that of your translation book. Then we have some other written questions. We have one that will be you'll be given some information, and you'll be asked to switch, for example, the tense or the person. So, for example, his name is Mike, and then it will say past. So his name was Mike. Or it will say, his name is Mike, interrogative. And you'll say, was his name, or is his name Mike? Okay. The table is red. And then it could say, for example, should. And you say, should the table be red? Right? The table is, or the table, or in an affirmative, the table should be red. So it could be, it can ask you to change the tense. It can ask you to add an auxiliary verb. It can ask you to change the person. For example, it could say, his name is Mike. And then first person. So you change his to my. My name is Mike, for example. But that one will be fairly well explained, I think. There will also be some fill-in-the-blank questions with some translation where you'll be asked to fill in the word that is missing. There will also be some multiple choice questions with where you will be asked to choose the answers that are acceptable, that would be grammatically correct. There's also some reading comprehension and written expression questions where you'll be given the reading comprehension, you'll be given some short texts and asked to respond to questions on those texts, and then a written portion as well, where you'll be given, one of them you'll be given a picture and asked to describe it in English, and in the other you'll be asked a general question that you simply have to answer through writing. There will also be an oral portion with a Vaughan teacher, and in this portion you will be asked a number of questions very similar to what we've done on the program, and you'll be you will be graded on your ability to answer those questions. So that's the test. That's how it's going to work. And I think if you've been paying attention, if you've been following along, it won't be too much trouble for you. So I wouldn't worry, but I would study, I would practice, I would keep working hard, as you always do, I'm sure, right? And I'm sure you'll do fine with it. All right, I want to move on now and take a look at the verb to tend, T-E-N-D. Here we are in class 194, to tend. And for example, I tend to spend a lot of time in the radio studio. Tender. But I'm not talking about hanging up. No, es tender la ropa. No. To tend is to have the tendency to do something. I tend to spend a lot of time in the radio studio. I tend to work here a lot. I tend to record a lot of programs. All right? Suelo estar de acuerdo con él. I tend to agree with him. Si voy de compras cuando tengo hambre, tiendo a comprar más comida de lo normal. If I go shopping when I'm hungry, I tend to buy more food than usual. I tend to work late into the evenings. I tend to eat a lot of pasta. I don't eat pasta every day, but I tend to eat a fair bit of pasta, a substantial amount of pasta. I tend to eat it. I have the tendency to eat it. I do it fairly regularly. It's common. It's normal for me. I tend to do it. Okay, I want to quickly rush ahead because we're running out of time. I want to take a quick look now at our vocabulary of the day. Vocabulary of the day. All right, it's time for the vocabulary of the day. Our 5 words of vocabulary. De repente. De repente is our first word, which is suddenly. Suddenly. I was in the recording studio when suddenly the lights went out. They went out. There was no power. The lights went out. Propina. Propina. Tip. T-I-P. T-I-P. Do you leave a tip? Do you leave tips for waiters? Do you tip waiters? I think most people do, but it's far more common in North America to leave substantial tips. Yeah. Chocar. Chocar, this is the verb to crash. C-R-A-S-H. I've never crashed into anything with my car. I don't think so. No, I haven't. I've never crashed my car into anything. Convencer. Convencer. To convince. The verb to convince. Poseer. Poseer. This is the verb to own. To own. Do you own a watch? Yes, I do. I own a watch. I own one watch. I own a watch. All right. We have one more section here. We have one more thing to look at. The future continuous tense. But we'll practice this tomorrow because we're completely out of time. We will practice this tomorrow in our last class, ladies and gentlemen, class 195. You won't want to miss it. It's going to be fantastic. Make sure you tune in. Okay, I'm going to take a break, but I'll be back in just a few minutes with the advanced portion of today's class. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.